Hi, it's Ileana. So I've just been holding a steady energy of exploration and curiosity. Source Creator had done a channeling about Tartaria, about Lemuria, and a little bit about Atlantis, the origins. The focus was really Tartaria Hyperborea and Pangea. But that has all interconnectedness of going back to origins of Atlantis and Lemuria and how at first the groups were one and then they separated into smaller groups and expanded out in the universe on Earth and other places. So there's common denominators of soul exploration, exploring what souls are, what bodies they come into, what even objects they apparently would come into in the beginning of creation. And I had written a book, How Creation Started, that creation wanted what it is like to expand itself and create in physical reality, not just from energy, but physicality. And I find that Michael Mirdad, who's a spiritual teacher, his talk about Lemuria expands out on what Source Creator had channeled about creation, about exploration, Lemuria, Atlantis, and parts of the Tartaria, Hyperborea, and Pangea. Those parts relate back to Atlantis and Lemuria as origins. And also the Y-Files apparently recently did a show on Atlantis and Lemuria, and what Source Creator talked about the technology of the crystals and the firestones being in these generator devices that created zero-point energy and free energy to power all the cities with unlimited energy supplies. Source Creator also talked about that in the channeling. So there's people doing good research to reveal the truth about the origins of Atlantis and Lemuria and also creation. So I thought I would do a compilation of all these resources and put them together so that people can have a reference point to hear about all these topics, to understand better the history, the Earth history, galactic history. So I'm going to compile the Source Creator channeling together with the Michael Mirdad talk about Lemuria and the Y-Files AJ's portions of that talk about Atlantis and Lemuria and that technology as a resource guide where people can visit and listen to these three combined resources together for that higher knowledge understanding of these subjects.
For thousands of years, the world has been captivated by the mystery of Atlantis. The concept of an ancient city hidden beneath the ocean is intriguing. But what if there was not just a city, but an entire continent buried beneath the waves? The continent of Lemuria is a huge landmass believed to have sunk in the Indian Ocean after some ancient catastrophic event. Atlantis and Lemuria are similar in that they've sparked numerous theories, legends, and interpretations. But Atlantis and Lemuria are very different in one way. There's no proof of Atlantis. 1858, zoologist Philip Sclater made a name for himself in the scientific community. He divided the world into 6 geographic regions based on the distribution of animal species. They were Palearctic, Ethiopian, Indian, Australasian, Nearctic, and Neotropical. Sclater's system is still used today. While Sclater created his classification system, a mystery emerged: the fossils of lemurs. Lemur fossils were found in parts of South America, India, Africa, and Madagascar. These areas are not connected by land, but lemurs don't swim. The question haunted Sclater: how did lemurs spread across the world? Identical species don't develop in different places at once. He had a radical answer: that there was a landmass once connecting these areas. It would need to be massive, bigger than Australia. His theory was a stretch, but it would solve the mysteries he'd stumbled upon. Along with the unexplainable locations of lemurs, Sclater also uncovered extreme similarities between monkeys found in South America and Africa. In 1864, Sclater published an essay about his theory in a scientific journal. In the essay, he refers to his proposed continent as Lemuria.
Anterior to the existence of Africa in its present shape, a large continent occupied parts of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans, stretching out towards what is now America to the west and to India on the east. In Madagascar and the Mascarene Islands, we have existing relics of this great continent, for which, as the original focus of the Stirps Lemurum, I should propose the name Lemuria.
This land bridge concept was popular in the scientific community at the time. Sir Charles Lyell, a well-known geologist and teacher, believed continents were rising above and sinking below the ocean routinely, just very gradually. So it's no surprise that following the publication of Philip Sclater's essay, the Lemuria theory really caught on. It turned out Lemuria may have been the answer to many scientific mysteries. In fact, Lemuria may have been the birthplace of humanity itself. In 1864, Philip Sclater introduced the concept of Lemuria to the world. 24 years later, Helena Blavatsky, a Russian theosophist and co-founder of the Theosophical Society, published a book titled The Secret Doctrine. Theosophists, like Blavatsky, are truth seekers who study a combination of religion, science, and philosophy. They believe in an ancient wisdom that unites all major religions. The Secret Doctrine discusses the origins of humanity. It outlines a sequence of 7 root races representing different stages of human development. Currently, we are in the 5th stage, with the 6th and 7th yet to come. According to the Secret Doctrine and other writings by Blavatsky's followers, the first root race was ethereal and didn't possess physical bodies. They may have appeared as giant phantoms. The second root race was shapeless and asexual.
Asexual?
Well, they didn't engage in sexual activity.
Sounds like they were married.
They reproduced through a process called budding, which is essentially natural cloning. The third root race thrived in Lemuria and coexisted with dinosaurs. According to Theosophist W. Scott Elliott, these Lemurians were giants.
His stature was gigantic, somewhere between 12 and 15 feet. His skin was of a yellowish-brown color. He had a strangely flattened face, eyes small but piercing, and set curiously far apart, so that he could see sideways as well as in front. The head sloped backwards and upwards in a rather curious way. The arms and legs, especially the former, were longer in proportion than ours.
Early in the Lemurian period, these supposed human ancestors laid eggs, but over millions of years, their reproductive process developed into, well, the one that we know today. But Blavatsky and her followers weren't the only people who wrote about the Lemurians. A few years later, British writer James Churchward started writing about the sunken continent of Mu. At first, Mu was thought to be the inspiration for Plato's story of Atlantis, but Churchward connected it to Lemuria, and now many consider these lost continents one and the same. James Churchward's work is based on the translations of ancient Indian tablets. These texts are included in a series of books called The Children of Mu. The tablets describe an ancient civilization of 60 million people that was eventually destroyed. According to Churchward and others like archaeologist Augustus Le Plongeon, the sunken continent of Mu once stretched from Hawaii in the north to Easter Island in the east and almost reached Japan in the west. The Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan is believed to be the underwater ruins of this lost civilization. Nan Madol in Micronesia is considered the southern part of Mu. The site contains structures made of large volcanic rock logs. It's unknown who built them or how, but the society was advanced. Recent LiDAR imaging revealed an artificial irrigation system that provided fresh water to residents throughout the area. They even had a sewer system, years before the ancient Greeks or other advanced civilizations. Easter Island marks the eastern point of Mu. Take a look at Easter Island. It's a small island in the middle of nowhere, yet it was once home to 12,000 people. How did they get there? Mainstream science says they traveled thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean in canoes. But if the continent of Mu existed, they could have just walked there. This could also explain the similarities between Polynesian languages and Greek, as well as the worship of a sun god named Ra on Easter Island, which is similar to the Egyptian sun god Ra. These similarities of language and religion suggest that these cultures either intermingled or originated from a common source. James Churchward, Le Plongeon, Helena Blavatsky, they all describe Lemuria and Mu differently. But there's one thing they all agree on. It was destroyed in a terrible cataclysm. Chan Thomas, in his book The Adam and Eve Story, presents compelling evidence that global disasters occur in a cycle. Lemuria might have been destroyed during one of these events. According to James Bramwell and William Scott Elliott, supporters of this theory, Lemuria was destroyed 11,500 years ago in a global disaster. And evidence of a global cataclysm can be found all over the Earth, from the pyramids of Giza, across Africa, and even on Easter Island. Now, of course, I'm referring to the Great Flood mentioned in the myths of every culture on Earth. The flood that occurred during a period of history called the Younger Dryas. As the last ice age drew to a close, the massive ice sheets that had covered much of the northern hemisphere began to rapidly melt away. Great torrents of fresh water poured into the oceans, causing sea levels to rise dramatically across the globe. Coastal areas were transformed by the flood as shorelines expanded inland by hundreds of miles. Entire land masses were submerged beneath the rising seas. The lives of every human on Earth were disrupted by the Great Flood. Entire cultures that had been tied to the old shorelines were shattered and scattered. But a few resourceful people survived and rebuilt their civilization. But this time they did it in secret and hidden far away from any future global catastrophe. But what caused the ice sheets to melt in the first place? There's disagreement about this. Some think it was the impact of a massive comet or asteroid. Others think it was a solar event so destructive that plasma from the sun stripped away the Earth's magnetic field, exposing the planet to extreme heat and radiation. Or a pole shift, which would also create a worldwide disaster. But there is one legend of Lemuria that contains a different explanation. That the Great Flood wasn't caused by an asteroid or the sun. It's said that the Great Flood was caused by people. According to Blavatsky, Lemuria was destroyed by fire. Volcanic eruptions shattered the continent into islands. Slowly, the islands sank into the sea, along with Lemurian history. James Churchward's version of the sinking of Mu is more dramatic and immediate. The civilization was obliterated in a single night of terror. Intense earthquakes shook the land. Volcanic eruptions spewed fire and ash. Relentless tsunamis engulfed the entire continent. It was a catastrophic event. In one night, everything was gone. There are even speculations that the Lemurians were eradicated by a pole shift, a sudden and civilization-ending event. Churchward's depiction resembles this cataclysmic shift. Volcanoes erupting around the world simultaneously, massive waves flooding everything, an entire civilization wiped away in an afternoon. Others propose something even more chilling. The destruction of Lemuria was not natural at all. They believe it was intentional. There is a 10,000-year-old story, which appears in books like the Chronicles of Akakor, which says the lost continents of Lemuria and Atlantis sank due to a nuclear war caused by the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are deities of the ancient Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. And some consider the Anunnaki an alien race who created humans through DNA manipulation, then used humans as slaves. The Chronicles of Akakor tells the story of two hostile divine races that eventually went to war.
The four corners of the earth were red. The two races of gods started to dispute.
In J.J. Benitez's book, The Visitors, he recounts the alien abduction of a scientist, Daniel W. Fry, on July 4th, 1959. While Fry was on the alien vessel, they told him that they were the descendants of a race who lived on the land of Mu. They said there was another advanced civilization on Earth that we call the Atlanteans. Edgar Cayce also received telepathic messages about Atlantis. He described their culture and their technology.
In our great city, we harnessed the Firestone's energy through advanced mechanics. Our domed power station concentrated the stone's rays via prisms. This energy propelled our crafts through induction, similar to your remote radio control. Though invisible, the rays powered vehicles through the air on land and sea. Carefully aligned, the stone's forces regenerated human bodies and fueled industries.
Cayce also predicted that Atlantis would eventually be discovered.
The position as the continent Atlantis occupied is that as between the Gulf of Mexico on the one hand and the Mediterranean upon the other. Evidences of this lost civilization are to be found in the Pyrenees and Morocco on the one hand, British Honduras, Yucatan and America upon the other, the British West Indies or the Bahamas, and a portion of same that may be seen in the present, if the geological survey would be made in some of these, especially or notably in Bimini and in the Gulf Stream through this vicinity. These may be even yet determined.
Now keep in mind that it was 1939 when Edgar Cayce predicted that Atlanta would be discovered in Bimini in the Bahamas. The Bimini Road wasn't discovered until 1968. According to Cayce and others, Atlanteans lived peacefully on Earth for over 200,000 years, but then the Anunnaki started to influence and corrupt the leaders of Atlantis. The corrupted Atlanteans, known as the Sons of Belial, initiated a conflict with Lemuria. About 25,000 years ago, Atlantis and Lemuria disagreed on how to rule the Earth. Atlantis wanted to dominate all tribes and civilizations worldwide. But the Lemurians wanted the Earth's civilizations to develop on their own, so they ordered Atlantis to leave them alone. Atlantis refused. Lemuria insisted. Atlantis chose war. The beginning of the war was the year 10,468 BC. In his writing, Plato mentions 9,500 BC as the year that Atlantis was destroyed. An ancient historian named Hemus reports a terrible catastrophe that occurred in 11,000 BC. But how were these civilizations destroyed? Well, the Atlanteans had extremely advanced technology and weapons.
Their technologies and weapons were beyond what we know today. Flying crafts powered by fire crystals traversed the skies. Great energy beams harvested from the Earth itself fueled weapons that could level mountains.
Lemuria was not as well armed and could not avoid war.
They burned the world with solar heat and tried to draw energy from each other. Rivers have been changed, and the height of the mountains and the strength of the sun have changed. There have been continents that have been flooded.
In the end, more than 60 million Lemurians died. The survivors took refuge in Agartha and later attacked Atlantis. The Earth became unstable as a result of nuclear explosions, and because of that, the Earth's axis changed and the poles shifted. All that remained of Atlantis are ancient structures like Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids. The civilization of Atlantis did not survive the conflict, but about 10,000 Lemurians did survive, and they rebuilt their civilization. But this time they did it in secret. And that civilization exists today, thriving, under a mountain in California. Mount Shasta in Northern California has become synonymous with the unknown. Many who venture close to the mountain report strange events, glowing orbs, unexplained voices, and a tangible sense of another presence. Mount Shasta is also considered a vortex, a place where the boundary between dimensions is thin. Native American tribes speak of its sacred power, a spot where the spirit world is accessible. Then there are the geological mysteries. Why does Shasta have such a complex structure and so many different kinds of rock? Why do some plants grow there that are found nowhere else? Where did those plants come from? Well, legend has it that some Lemurians survived the cataclysm. The survivors traveled to North America and brought with them plants and animals and technology. They then built a city underneath Mount Shasta. They called this city Telos, the City of Light, and eyewitnesses have described the city in detail.
As you approach the hidden entrance to Telos, an energy pulsates through the ground. There is a deep humming sound and a vibration that you can feel all over your body.
Once inside, you are enveloped by a soft light that emanates from the walls of the city. Telos is carved into 5 expansive levels, each one a labyrinth of corridors, chambers, and gardens.
The inhabitants of Telos are 7 feet tall and draped in flowing white robes. Despite their large size, they move slowly and gracefully. They are the Lemurians, the guardians of their ancient, lost civilization. Their technology is integrated with their natural surroundings, just as it did in Lemuria before the fall.
In Telos, they use crystal technology. Large crystalline structures serve various functions. They have healing chambers that resonate with frequencies that restore the body and the soul. They have crystal communication devices that allow mental connection across the entire planet.
Transportation within the city is achieved through levitating platforms that glide along magnetic lines, guided by thought alone.
At the center of Telos is the Temple of the Heart. Here, a large crystal pulses with a heartbeat, a rhythm synchronized with the natural resonance of the earth.
Residents of Mount Shasta claim to have seen tall beings wearing white robes walking at the foot of the mountain. Hikers have even followed the beings into caves, but when the hikers finally get inside the cave, it's empty, though some say you can still hear and feel the humming vibration. One eyewitness actually made the news in the early 20th century. In 1904, J.C. Brown, a British prospector, was hired by a mining company to search for gold deposits in Northern California. While investigating around Mount Shasta, he noticed an odd-looking piece of rock that didn't match the surrounding area. As he began clearing the debris and vegetation surrounding the rock, he found an entrance to a cavern system that led deep into Mount Shasta. Brown walked about 3 miles into the interior of the mountain through an array of crisscrossing tunnel systems when he began stumbling across pieces of gold. After the 11th mile, he reached a location that resembled a village. Inside the village, he came across chambers filled with gold and copper tablets. He found statues and spears and weapons, and he found skeletons. The average heights of these skeletons were around 6 foot 6 inches tall, and the tallest being 10 feet in height. Over the next few days, he took pages and pages of notes. He memorized everything that he could, and when he left, he covered the entrance so that no one else would find it. And Brown spent the next 30 years researching and trying to build a group of experts to embark on an expedition. He finally gained a following of about 80 people willing to join the expedition, including a museum curator and several scientists. He spent 6 weeks planning out the entire trip, and several individuals sold off their properties believing that they would soon become rich. Brown was worried someone would sneak into the city in advance, so he withheld a lot of the specifics regarding the location of the cavern system. He met with the team one last time to make final preparations and establish the time and place of departure, June 19th at 1 p.m. The day finally arrived, and J.C. Brown didn't show, and he was never heard from again. But the story of Lemuria is not only told in the West. The Tamil people indigenous to South India have a story of a lost continent that dates back to ancient times. The name Kumari Kandam was applied to this sunken land. The legend tells of an early Tamil dynasty known as the Pandean kings. They ruled over the now submerged Kumari Kandam continent before it was swallowed by the rising seas at the end of the last ice age. According to the stories, Kumari Kandam was once located in the Indian Ocean between India and Madagascar. This large continent was the cradle of civilization, home to the first people. The Pandean kings ruled the entire continent from their capital city before successive floods submerged Kumari Kandam around 10,000 years ago. Is this just a Tamil legend, or is this actual history? Well, floods at the end of the last ice age, we have proof of that. But a lost continent in the Indian Ocean between Madagascar and India? That's so specific. There's no way there's proof of that, is there?
Is there? Is there?
There is. Imagine an ancient tropical land. Lush jungles stretch as far as the eye can see. Dinosaurs graze on treetops high above the forest floor, while early mammals stalk the dark ground below. This was Mauritia, a lost world forgotten beneath the waves. In 2013, scientists announced that they may have found traces of this vanished continent deep under the Indian Ocean. It had sunk below the sea millions of years ago when the continents were still joined as one supercontinent. Back then, South America and Africa hadn't split apart. India was attached to Madagascar, and Mauritia was squeezed in between. Mauritia was discovered by accident. Geologists studying rocks on the island of Mauritius, east of Madagascar, were confused. They found minerals too ancient to belong to such a young volcanic island. As they followed the clues, they found traces of a much older landmass. A huge mass of buried continental crust stretched across the Indian Ocean, a lost continent matching ancient minerals. The researchers named it Mauritia after the island that led to its discovery. But the location of Mauritia is exactly where some legends say Lemuria was. The details of the continent are still a mystery, with more questions than answers. Was it really an intact continent, or just a jumbled mass of islands? And what creatures might have lived on this island? And could some of those creatures have been the very early ancestors of the Lemurians? There is no hard evidence to support the existence of Lemuria or Atlantis. Everything we know about these civilizations comes from stories. So without evidence, places like Lemuria, the land of Mu, and Atlantis remain nothing but myths. But the accidental discovery of Mauritia shows that some ancient legends may be based in truth. The discovery of the continent of Mauritia happened completely by accident. Bimini Road was discovered by accident. So was the Yanaguni Monument. The city of Dwarka is described in ancient Indian texts as a magnificent city that was a symbol of prosperity. It was described as an advanced, well-planned city with beautiful gardens and temples and palaces. But according to Hindu legend, thousands of years ago, the seas began to rise, and eventually Dwarka disappeared into the ocean and was lost forever. And for 1,000 years, the story of the city of Dwarka was thought to be symbolic. But in the 1980s, the ancient city was found and is estimated to be around 10,000 years old, maybe older. In 2001, an underwater discovery was made off the coast of Cuba. Structures were found that at first were thought to be natural formations, but a submersible robot was sent to the site and found what's been described as an entire city. And what makes this find so extraordinary is that it's about 2,000 feet down. Scientists have said it could take 50,000 years for a city to sink that far. Now, even if it's not that old, there are blocks down there that are thought to be at least 6,000 years old, but nobody can say for sure. All of these discoveries were made by accident, and as long as people keep exploring the sea, there's a chance that Atlantis and Lemuria might eventually be found. And if we actually excavate the sites off India and Japan in the east, and Cuba and the Bahamas in the west, we may realize that Atlantis and Lemuria have already been found.
According to so-called speculative theories, the Lemurians believed to be the ancestors of modern human society, originated from the lost continent of Lemuria. The mysterious submerged land continues to captivate and intrigue people around the world today. Lemuria is often portrayed as utopia on Earth. The enigmatic landmass is believed to have covered regions such as Africa, Madagascar, India, and islands in the Indian and Pacific Oceans. In 1864, the zoologist Philip Sclater first proposed the concept of a continent on which Lemuria was located in ancient times. Mythology suggests that all of Earth's landmass was once a colossal ancient continent known as Pangea, which broke apart over time, leaving some segments submerged underwater. Such is the supposed fate of Lemuria. However, these theories remain unconfirmed by science. The submerged Lemurian continent is also called the Miu continent. The name Lemuria is derived from the lemurs believed to have inhabited these regions. Meanwhile, the Indians had their own ancient term for their submerged continent, long before the 1864 theory, calling it Kumari Kandam. The Lemurians are believed to have been part of a highly developed extraterrestrial society. Their lives lasted more than a millennium, and their height was about 4 to 5 meters. They had 3 eyes, 2 in front and 1 behind, as well as 4 hands. However, they lacked digestive and some other human organs, relying on energy from nature for their sustenance. The Lemurians were highly spiritual and possessed extraordinary supernatural powers, including telepathy, levitation, and clairvoyance. In this video, we will look for the traces of the ancestors of modern human civilization. We will delve into the theories of their history and examine the version of an alleged ancient war with the Atlanteans. Legend has it that, like the story of Atlantis, Lemuria was engulfed by a colossal natural disaster and submerged under the Indian Ocean more than 12,000 years ago. The few remaining Lemurians scattered across the earth, laying the foundations of today's human civilization. Theory suggests that the spiritual advanced Lemurians gradually became more primitive over time, eventually becoming the ancestors of modern humans. At first, they were asexual and reproduced by cloning, but over time they developed human organs and separated into male and female sexes. Some theories suggest that the Lemurians and the Atlanteans existed at the same time, albeit in different locations. Others claim that the Lemurians are descendants of the Atlanteans and their society originated from the Atlanteans who survived the flood. Regardless of the truth, one aspect remains constant in the ancient myths. Unlike the Atlanteans, the Lemurians possessed no material wealth and demonstrated no material prosperity. They were primarily focused on spirituality and the divine. An interesting theory suggests that the Lemurians may even have predated the Atlanteans, supporting the notion that spirit came before matter. American scientist Ellis Silver proposes the idea that various advanced extraterrestrial species seeded humanity on Earth about 200,000 years ago. This hypothesis is gaining popularity in esoteric circles, with many rejecting Darwin's theory of human origins. In 1870, biologist Ernst Haeckel also suggested that Lemuria might be the cradle of mankind. The well-known occultist and medium Helena Blavatsky shared the view in her 1888 book, The Secret Doctrine, in which Lemuria and the Lemurians were presented as the genesis of the human race. As already mentioned, the Lemurians were considered a race with clairvoyant powers, and according to esoteric enthusiasts, they foresaw the submergence of their own land. This foresight has enabled them to prepare for the coming flood and preserve precious relics of their existence and culture. It is said that among these protected treasures, the most valuable are ancient manuscripts dating from the Lemurian era, which to this day remain somewhere well hidden from us humans. The legend continues in that, although expected, the catastrophe happened earlier than expected. As a result, most of the population of Lemuria perished under the waters of the Indian Ocean. Only a few thousand Lemurians managed to survive. The continent's sudden disappearance resembles the dramatic and mysterious fate of Atlantis. Edgar Cayce, one of the most famous clairvoyants in history, also mentioned the Lemurians in his visions. According to his insights, unlike the Atlanteans who supposedly inhabited the earth to redeem their karmic debt, the Lemurians bore no such responsibility. Their goal was to raise their spirits and then learn to control and manage their physical bodies. The intrigue surrounding Lemuria and the ancient Lemurians intensified further in 2013 when geologists discovered sunken granite fragments in the ocean south of India, extended to Madagascar, which coincided with the occult belief that Lemuria once existed in that region. Among the additional evidence is the discovery of remarkable megalithic structures, such as the Moai on Easter Island and similar ones on several Pacific islands where the Lemurians are believed to have resided. Researchers suggest that these structures were built by the Lemurians themselves. Already in the 15th century, a group known as Tamil nationalists used the term Kumari Kandam. It at first appears in the Kanda Puranam, the Tamil edition of the Skanda Puranam, a sacred Hindu text. It refers to an ancient, now lost continent called the birthplace of civilization. The narrative also spread to India, where the country once accepted the legend as a historical fact. It describes a land that was long ago swallowed by water called the Kumari Kandam, which is now called Lemuria. According to folklore, Lemuria and Kumari Kandam are one and the same, a legendary lost continent of the ancient Tamil civilization located in the Indian Ocean. The narrative speaks of its rulers ruling the entire Indian subcontinent, suggesting that the Tamil civilization is among the oldest. When Kumari Kandam disappeared beneath the waves, its inhabitants scattered and created different civilizations, turning the ancient continent into the lost birthplace of civilization. There's no definite evidence for the existence of Lemuria or Kumari Kandam. However, researchers from India's National Institute of Oceanography have found that about 14,500 years ago, the sea level was about 100 meters lower, and about 10,000 years ago, it was about 60 meters lower. This suggests that there may have been a land bridge connecting Sri Lanka and mainland India in the past. Global warming accelerated 12,000 years ago, causing sea levels to rise and periodically flooding numerous settlements along the coast of India and Sri Lanka. The submerged lands of Lemuria and Atlantis are believed to have been destroyed as a result of a nuclear conflict caused by the Anunnaki, who convinced the Atlanteans that they should dominate the earth, according to an obscure account dating back more than 12,000 years, to which is spoken of as texts such as the Chronicles of Akakar. A nuclear war led to a global disaster, but some Lemurians and Atlanteans managed to survive. The story goes that more than 12,000 years ago, the two continents were located above water. Lemuria was located in the Pacific Ocean and Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean. In the Chronicles of Akakor, Carl Bruguera claims that the two continents were inhabited by two different divine races, whose civilizations are much more advanced than ours. The conflict between them escalated and culminated in a devastating battle involving nuclear weapons. Darkness covered the surface of the earth. Although the sun continued to shine, a vast, dense fog cast a shadow over the landscape. Peculiar signs appeared in the sky. A red sun and a dark trajectory intersected, says a passage from the story. The two divine factions tried to drain each other's energy as they incinerated the planet with solar heat. The rivers changed, the mountains shifted, and the brightness of the sun changed. Floods followed that wiped out entire continents. Lemuria is also mentioned in several mysterious Hindu tablets discovered by James Churchward in 1864. He and the high priest of the temple concluded that the tablets told of the lost land of Miu, inhabited by the Naakalis, or Holy Brothers. The tablets say that Miu, or Lemuria, sank about 12,000 years ago, and that Easter Island and the other Polynesian islands are remnants of the lost island. The American psychic Edgar Cayce received a telepathic vision from extraterrestrial beings coming from Cassiopeia. According to their accounts, the Atlanteans had a long history, developed space travel capabilities, and even established bases on other planets, such as Mars. In addition, they possessed a secret technology that harnessed energy from space with the help of huge crystals. There is conflicting evidence about the nature of the Atlanteans. Some sources portray them as intelligent and benevolent beings who eventually turned malevolent, while others claim they originated from another solar system and were cold and callous in nature. We open this long parenthesis with the clarification because the narrative goes like this. The Atlanteans coexisted peacefully in Atlantis since 210,000 BC. However, their society was compromised by the Anunnaki and especially by corrupt Atlantean high priest. The conflict with Lemuria began with these deprived Atlanteans, self-proclaimed sons of Belial, began to dispute the Lemurians for global dominance about 25,000 years ago. The Atlanteans are trying to subjugate all other tribes and civilizations on Earth. On the other hand, the Lemurians advocated the natural evolution of other societies and called for non-interference. This position eventually led the Atlanteans to start a war against Lemuria, which ended with a plan for a nuclear strike. The disaster was further exacerbated by the igniting of underground gas reservoirs. Over 60 million Lemurians perished as a result. The remaining survivors hid in caves before launching another attack on the Atlanteans. However, the final demise of this ancient continent was inevitable due to a series of natural disasters caused by the weapons used. The many Atlanteans also fled and hid in caves all over the world. It is said that the symbols associated with Atlantis, such as spirals and crescent moons, can still be found in these caves today. As the ages passed and the stability of the earth was restored, the two civilizations revived and gave rise to the cultures we know today as Sumer, Egypt, India, and China. Later, the Anunnaki returned and secretly took control of Earth, marking the beginning of history as we know it. Fantastic story, myth, or reality, we leave it to you to judge for yourself. Undoubtedly, the great obscurity and the impossibility of researching any artifacts today related to this ancient civilization will continue to excite our interest and curiosity for many centuries to come.
Today I'm going to ask Source Creator some questions about Tartaria and Hyperborea, the Hyperboreans, where they come from. Source Creator, what can you please tell me about Tartaria and Hyperborea and the Hyperboreans? I had heard that Tartaria was an ancient civilization that had advanced flight capabilities. They worked with crystals, they built beautiful cities, and they were taken out about in the 16 to 1800s with flooding, and their civilization was wiped off the face of the earth. The Hyperboreans are, I heard that they're the tall beings with red and blonde hair, and they are on an island in parts of Europe, so they're still there, but they came from inner Earth, and they have also cities in inner Earth. And they also have advanced capabilities of thought consciousness, and they take care of nature and connect to nature. They have blonde hair, red hair, up to 14 feet tall. They're strong, the Hyperboreans. So this is what I know about Tartaria and Hyperboreans. Source creator, what can you tell me about the nature of Tartaria, where it originated, who the beings were, the nature of Hyperborea and Hyperboreans, where they came from, and what the beings are in Hyperborea? Ileana, the Tartarians have been on Earth since 200,000 years ago. They are a genetic conglomeration of humanoids, Earth humans, and they're also a result of the galactic humanoid beings that came to Earth with the human experiment to amalgamate the highest human DNA with ET DNA for evolution of intelligence, for evolution of strength, evolution of capacity of spirit to come within the full soul of experience. The Tartarians were able to download vast amounts of information from their spirit energy into their physical bodies. Tartarians were up to 8 feet tall. They were extremely intelligent from their genetics. And again, they're offshoots from the remnants of Atlantis and Lemuria and Mu. It was a big continent that had sank because of the infighting from Atlanteans and attacking Lemurians and vice versa. There was nuclear war fallout on the planet about 11,000 years ago and 9,000 years ago. So those are the remnants of Atlantean and also Lemurian civilizations. They formed Tartaria. So they were indeed partly galactic. They came from Mintaka. They had come from Maldak. They had come from Pleiades. They had come from many different systems in your known universe. And they participated in a soul spiritual evolution of connecting to spirit of the soul, to know the true soul of who you are in the multiverse. They had all their memories intact as they came in as souls into the physical body to experience spirit and soul and physicality. So they, in Tartaria, they had these beautiful cities 200,000 years ago until approximately the 1800s, 1811, where these mud floods took out their cities. Now, those mud floods were not natural. They were energy directed to stop the cities from flourishing. The Tartarians are remnants of the Atlanteans and Lemurians who had survived the nuclear war fallout catastrophes. Some had gone to inner Earth. Some had rebuilt. Tartarians are a mix of those peoples. They are extremely smart. They built cities. They had these beautiful crystalline devices that were set up in cores within the cities, within core generators to power the cities. So they had electromagnetic abilities to create unlimited energy frequency, just as the Atlanteans had and the Lemurians. It's the same technology. They kept advancing it, so they were able to expand their life force frequency and live from 300 to 400 years. Because these crystalline devices, the crystal fire coming from these crystals, had the capacity to expand their life force. So their cities were built on similar schematics as the Atlantean cities. They had what you call flying cars. They had the ability to levitate and even travel upwards in the air. They kept meticulous records of how they had continued to evolve after fall of Atlantis and Lemuria. So the Tartarians, they were in Europe, for the most part, what is now Europe. They built beautiful cities there. There's even evidence of this that was brought to North America in the intricate and elaborate monuments that were built in the North America, even after the fall of Tartaria. The mystery schools preserved their teachings. So the mud floods that wiped out the Tartarian cities and their civilization, it was done because the powers that be that still control the structure on this planet, which you call the elites, they wanted no evidence of the advancements of Tartaria. So that's why they directed energy beam frequency that caused the mud slides. Those mudslides, that was not natural. And that is what wiped out Tartarians, because their consciousness allowed them to store large amounts of information. They had a unique connection to 7 different universes that they were connected to download information from the multiverse. And they were getting ready to release the information of this, how to build advanced cities that work with nature and do not cause pollution and do not cause any type of damage or stripping of natural resources to the planet. They were getting ready to release this. However, the ones that control the planet, the elites, they wanted an industrial revolution without free energy, without zero-point technology. So it didn't benefit them to have that come in from the Tartarians. That's why they were taken out earlier. Now their schematics of the cities, the technology, the crystalline energy, the crystal fire, if you will, within the crystals itself, this all came from Atlantis. And some of it from Lemuria, the crystal generators, how to keep the crystals stable within the generation fields. That came from Lemuria as well. So that technology has been preserved in the mystery schools. The Tartarians had built the first of what they had called the step pyramids. For them, it was the pyramids were built in layers. They weren't all as big as the Egyptian pyramids at the Giza Plateau that came later. So they built smaller style pyramids as points of the center in their cities to power the energetic frequencies of the cities. They had cities that had domed cupolas on some of the bigger structures. They had cityscapes that were not built from concrete. It was built of a material much what has the properties of gold, but it was mixed with other minerals to sustain long-lasting buildings that would not crumble. But the consistency of gold as a frequency was in the building structures themselves, the pyramids acting as center points of energetic frequency, as power converters, interconnecting energy in these cities with the flying machines flying above, delivering supplies, delivering people, acting as transport. So, in crystalline energy sources, the firestones, in the middle of some of these pyramids and other structures powering the cities. Imagine a firestone crystal has the power of the sun, the same frequency, to generate almost unlimited energy, 0 point, tapping into 0 point frequency. This is what the Tartarians had access to. This came from Atlantis as these technologies, and they maintained them and had the same knowledge, so they could rebuild their own cities. And evidence of Tartarian cities were being found up to 1850. Their cities, vessels, and bodies of large humanoids, which has all been covered up as evidence because they were erased from the human record. They were like the second era of humanity. And they were highly evolved. Again, they worked with crystals. They worked with holographic technology. They could build buildings that would not crumble. The architecture was massive. The pyramids. And their knowledge of building pyramids, buildings, that all came from Atlantis because they originated in parts of the Atlantean outposts, colonies. So the evidence of the Tartarian civilization spanned hundreds of thousands of years in what they had accomplished and done. The Tartarians had been a balanced civilization. They took care of their people. There was no famine, hunger, wars, disease in their communities. As a civilization, they were grounded and peaceful. Their thought consciousness, spirit-to-soul connection was very advanced and strong. So they were not easy to infiltrate or remove as a civilization until the elites started to try to introduce the industrial civilization to planet beyond the 1800s. So this would be the time of encroachment on the Tartarian lands, setting fires, setting energy beam weapons, directing flooding, mudslides. Even in the 1800s, 1900s, the elites had that kind of energy beam technology. Think of secret societies who've kept these records for thousands of years. They've had this technology for a long time, and they did target Tartaria for destruction and evisceration with fires, mudslides, earthquakes, to completely take down anything to do with Tartarian structures and civilization. So it was a time of a different age where the elite structure got a hold of the information from the secret societies of how to direct energy beam frequency to shake up the earth, to create a disbalance in harmony. And that can take out any civilization eventually. So this is what happened to Tartaria. The Hyperboreans, they are also remnants of Lemuria and somewhat of Atlantis. They are more of a gregarian type of a civilization. They are farmers. They are creators of natural farming, natural sources on the planet, preserving nature. They are extremely intelligent. They have higher cranial capacity. They could reach up to 12 feet tall. Indeed, they were blondes, redheads. They had the ability to read people's minds and thought consciousness, to connect more on the soul level, whereas the Tartarians were more of downloaders of information and preserving information. The Hyperboreans were more of thought consciousness connection from mind to mind and preserving the land, farming, proper connection to humans, to animals, preserving the land. The Hyperboreans were more connected to the land, not so much advanced crystal technology, although they did have some of that. They were more nature-based, and they were on a huge island that is now impossible to find because it is protected and shielded. So Hyperboreans are still where they are, except people cannot find their island anymore because they do not want intruders interfering with their way of life. But in the ancient times, people could visit Hyperboreans, and Hyperboreans would send out their messengers to bring clean food, to bring information about the civilization. But when the Greeks came, all that stopped, and when Rome came, all that stopped. They closed off their island, so they became more remote and isolated, so that the outside world would not influence their civilization, much like the inner earth. The Lemurians, the Atlanteans, from the survivors of that catastrophe, created Telos, inner earth, Agartha, Shambhala. So did the Hyperboreans choose to close off their island. And that island was indeed near Europe. It is in the European region. It was quite spectacular and beautiful. It is much larger than England, much bigger. So they still work with thought consciousness, mind connection, and spirituality of consciousness evolution. Hyperboreans, some of them did go into inner earth in central Agartha. So they are also in Agartha, and they connect to different frequency of energies, what you call the golden rays, the blue rays. The Agarthans, the Hyperborean Agarthans, work with those energies. They seek to connect the spirit to the soul in a very thought consciousness balanced connection, more so than even the surface Hyperboreans at this time. So this is what Tartaria was. What was Hyperborea? Hyperboreans still exist on the surface of the planet. And they had actually one of the space ark ships land in their lands, and they were shown how to grow food in more nature-based ways with energy frequency, how to work with the elemental frequency of the dryad nature within their souls, because they are dryads. They are connected to nature. So the frequency of that ark ship showed them how to connect with their dryad elemental abilities more, to grow things from the earth, and how to create energetically clothing, sustainable ways of elemental energy working for manifestation as above, so below to the physical, from energy to physicality. They were shown how to do this, the surface Hyperboreans, in that space arc, because that arc was of a nature-based frequency of elemental energy, expanding out beings' elemental energy, of the dryads connected to earth, to nature, to energy frequency of nature, of growing things, creating things energetically, from energy to physicality. So those Hyperboreans on the island were very much connected to that space arc and what it taught them about their elemental abilities, how to expand those out. So this is some of the information about Tartaria and Hyperborea. There is much more in these histories. There's also Pangea, which was a huge landmass at one point. Then it separated as the beings wanted to explore individuality, physicality, individual thought consciousness. At one point, everyone lived as one on a huge landmass. Pangea and others that came before it. Then the land masses separated because these beings wanted to be more individual, to live in individual ways of life. Living as communities is important, and they were living as communities. It was a huge land mass, and it was consciousness connected together of everything, unity intertwined. But they wanted to feel individuality and separateness. So they branched off on their own, all these civilizations, the ancients, and that consciousness, desire, separated the land masses as well. So it's not just continental drift or tectonic plates separating. It is the individual consciousness of beings or collective consciousness that also shape the land masses of what the collective consciousness wishes to experience. So those creator beings at those times when all the land masses were together as one huge continent covering the earth, they wanted to experience individuality and separateness and live in smaller collectives. So they also influenced the land masses separating and shifting, because at that time they had higher connection to their abilities to influence the shifting of the earth, the crust, the oceans, the land masses, to create either togetherness or separation. They wanted to feel more individuality, so they took their collectives and spread out. When the continents separated according to their will, they spread out and felt in smaller collectives individuality and connection consciousness to who they were and evolved as a result. So there are intertwined connections here between ancient civilizations and the present as what Earth is shaped as now. I wanted to mention that as a preface of what happened even before Tartaria and Hyperborea. In these creator beings, humanoid galactics, and humans who lived in that collective on Pangea, and before that on the big continent before it separated. So there's many other names, not just Pangea before that, where it was a supercontinent, but then separated because they wanted to experience in smaller collectives soul evolution instead of one big collective as one. Because unity can come in many forms, as one consciousness, as many consciousnesses, many units of experience and expression of how creation expresses itself. So this also formed how the planet was back then and even now as a result. And there's much more details, of course, about these civilizations. This is sort of the origins and who the beings were and what they did and what they had in terms of what they worked with as an explanation for your questions.
Today I'm going to talk about Lemuria. Where does this guy come from? Angels? Fairies? Lemuria, really? They think it's arbitrary. Because separated people, separated minds need separated conversations. Their brains are separated, so they need just one little thing to believe in. It's all the same thing. Think about this. It's not, they're all the same. The origins, all of it is real. All of it's true. There are light beings. That's not an arbitrary conversation. You think I'm arbitrary when I bring these things up. Arbitrary is to separate them out. So it was all and is all true. Mythologies, the stories of gods, goddesses of Greek mythology. I mean, it's so odd to me. And I understand it. I understand that humans are messed up. So they need to have their little isms and their little shticks and whatever. But everything is connected. When people talked about Hercules in Greece, they were talking about Samson in Israel. The legends are of the same person, and sometimes it's not the same person, it's the same archetype that manifests in different cultures. But at one time, there weren't different cultures so much. There was a global communication. There was a global understanding. So, we started off one with God. And just like when you're looking at a fire and then little sparks pop, pop, and those little sparks come flying off the fire. That's us. Once the original fire of God and little sparks, and that's us. Except it happened at once where a countless number went pop. That's called the separation. Where we all seemingly flew into the darkness and onto the lawn, or wherever onto the sand or wherever the sparks flew, but they left the original fire. If you took one of those sparks, however, it's still from that original source. Just because it popped and landed on the grass or the sand over there doesn't mean it didn't. It looks like it's from a separate source, but it isn't. It's not sitting there burning independently. It came from something that gave it its fire. So we have the Spirit of God in us. That's that original fire. Just like the embers will eventually go out, that's a metaphor of us going to sleep and forgetting our divine fire. The ember goes out, it goes quiet. You could throw it back in the fire and it might light up again. That's you and I getting in touch with God and we feel inspired again and we're lit up again. It's great. But what looks separate. But it wasn't just souls that became you and me. Sometimes there's a loud pop and a bigger piece flies off. Those bigger pieces became, you could say, archetypes in the universe. Goddess type archetypes. Or sometimes planetary beings. I mean, even planets are beings. But people forget. They separate everything. It becomes astronomy where you just measure a planet. That's called objectifying, by the way. The word objectifying isn't something you just do to women. Anything you see as an object is objectifying. That's what the word means. You're making into an object. So a woman can say, I hate being objectified, made like I'm some object. Well, what you would hate even, more? You think you hate being objectified. You would hate even more if we didn't even see you as an object. I can't even see you. You'd be like, how come you're ignoring me? Because I don't want to see you as an object. There's one thing better and greater than not objectifying, and it's experiencing. I choose to know you, not see you. Know you. In the Bible, it's kind of funny because I'm going to bring all kinds of things in, I guess. In the Bible, the original word for having intimacy, instead of, using other words for it, but having intimacy, it was called knowing someone. And then he knew her, meant, woohoo. But why do you think they use that wording? Think about that. Because originally it was about knowing them, connecting with them. It wasn't nice legs, let's do something. It's, that's objectifying. But that's humans. That's the humans that fell and fell and fell and fell. And the ember went out. The fire went out. They lost sight of themselves. So what do you expect them to do? They're just little bits of, some sort of, whether it's wood or some other product that they're burning. You're just an ember that's gone out. And so in the desperation of being an ember that has no flame, no fire, no spark, you're bored and you're lonely. So you hit on each other and see each other as objects because there's nothing else to do when you're a little chunk of wood sitting on the sand. Hey, how are you doing over there? Can you ignite me again? And that's what relationships and codependence and drugs are all about, and drinking. Everybody's looking for something to ignite them again. but you're asking other cold, dead things to ignite you. Is this Valentine's Day or something? Sounding real romantic. Okay, so poof, we all flew away. And we all became the spirit sparks, flying into a universe that was starting. It's the womb of the mother that went to the father, I'm going to birth them. They're thinking that they're leaving, so I'm going to help go in with them to a place we're going to create together, co-creating the universe. So the womb is expanding to receive these little sparks or embryos that are us. And we flew into the universe, this vast universe that is the consciousness womb, metaphorically, the consciousness of the mother and the Holy Spirit of God. So she's here saying, I'll just mirror wherever you're at. I'll mirror wherever you're at. Every day, every thought, every emotion, I'm just going to be here mirroring this for you. And so we fly in what seems to be a vast universe, and it's just a dream experience, but let's just go with it as though it's happening for real time. So the universe is expanding. And all of a sudden in there's all these fiery nebula kind of this energy, this churning in the universe. Just as they say the universe would have been at the Big Bang. This fiery, just kind of celestial movement, this dance of energy. But then those things start densifying and becoming suns that blow off planets, that blow off moons, etc. We're in the meantime flying in. And we're saying, what is this? What happened? I don't know what happened. One minute it seems like we were one with something, God, and yet now we're flying into a dark universe. What are we and where are we? So in one respect, there's the sadness of having lost something that we knew was there a moment ago. And that's a sadness that no human being can understand. You think you're sad when you lose a loved one. When you lost everyone, including God, that was a sadness that was unbearable. So we chose to forget it. We chose to pretend, that's where the ego was created. We need to create a virus in our mind. We need to download a virus that will make us not have to deal with what we're feeling. So the separation was one thing. To try to hide from our emotions was even worse. And that's why the concept of responsibility is so important. Because if you truly take responsibility, you're not taking responsibility for all the naughty things you've done. You're taking responsibility for thinking you could have done anything other than love. Then it would disappear. So the ego makes you afraid of responsibility because if you take true responsibility, you'll reverse the separation and we'll go home. And the ego doesn't exist at home. So it's telling you for its own survival reasons, don't go there. Now, done. We fly in, and some of us went to the Sirian star system, some went to the Arcturian star system, some of us came to this star system. Those of us who gravitated here, we gravitated here. Now, some of us moved from different places, and I know this can sound a little out there, but it starts one with God, it's going to end one with God. God wills that no soul shall perish means everyone's going home. It's actually not going to be a few of us make it and every other being goes to hell. I mean, that's like the worst story you could ever have come up with. Only a few can make it and then everything's futile then. And then religions are even telling you're born with sin, your original sin. You don't stand a chance. So some religions don't even try to make it look good, like it might work. One religion's going, I know there's trillions of us, but only 144,000 can make it. That's like really wicked. And then there's Far Eastern traditions that say, no, we don't believe in that. Technically, you'll reincarnate until all of us make it. But they forget to tell you which is going to take 1 trillion years. I might as well just send me to hell, because that is hell to me. If I've got to come back and have 3,000 lifetimes or 50,000 lifetimes working on myself, I think this time I'll just work on smoking. Next time I'll work on drinking. Next time I'll try to have a head of hair. And whatever else is important to you. Whatever else is important to you. If you keep waiting for everything to be perfect enough lifetimes, it's like, you know what? Never mind. Just trapdoor me. Let me go to hell now. Because it's all the same. So whether you believe Far Eastern, whether you believe Christian 144,000, or whatever else, none of these are really good. The only good outcome is we all go home. We're all in this together. and we're all going to go home. God is one. The Lord thy God is one means we're part of that one, and that means half of us can't make it and half of us not. God would not be God if it was only half present. So we're all going to make it. But in the meantime, we flew into these universes, and we were, you could say, in soul bodies, almost like undefined energy, light. And eventually, as time's going on, there's some people that gravitated to this star system, some to others, but let's work with this star system. If you're here wishing you were in another star system, you're already failing your test. Because all that means is, I don't like where I am, and I don't want to deal with the issues and feelings that make me wish I were elsewhere. I mean, I don't care if you're doing this in your relationship, at a job, or in the star system. Wishing you were somewhere else tells us you're wounded here and you need to work on that. Yeah, but I wouldn't if I got to go to some other place. No, that's why you're not in that other place. So they sent you here to work on something. So just own it. So in this star system, we come in and some of us are going through, again, we're not defined bodies. So you're able to move into existence in planets and so on. Because there's different frequencies, different lessons, different energies going on in our musical scale called our planetary system. And it is a musical scale. Our planets each have musical notes to them. So you're coming in to experience the song of this star system. So now, when we do come in, we're coming in as soul bodies, soul beings. Gradually, as we come into the earth plane, we started becoming a little bit more what we would call astral bodies, astral beings. Astral is like your ghost. But if I right now leave this body and enter my astral body, I would look like a ghost of Michael. Because we all remembered Michael, so my astral body would look like Michael. But when you're first coming in, there was no other person you were, so the astral self doesn't look like a person. It's just a tad more dense than pure energy. And pure energy, I'm saying you're still a being, but sort of a cloud of light, we'll call it. So we start taking on astral bodies. Now, where we gravitated, where life was starting on planet Earth, primarily as a place called Lemuria. I know it sounds fabulistic even more than Atlantis, so it's okay. Just hang in there as best you can. Think of this as a flashback, all right? Just a weird trip you're having, okay? So we come in and we're taking on these astral soul bodies, mixture of soul body and astral body, and we're coming in and we're going, where are we? Where are we? But the planet is forming. And gradually you have your prehistoric creatures here. And we're looking at the foliage and water and, these creatures, and we're going, where are we? And so what we had, the gift that we still maintain, was the ability to create through thought. So we would say to ourselves, I wonder what that is. And we actually projected ourselves even into objects. The problem is, when we, in this pure state, the beautiful state really, but we're in this pure state, when we projected into things, you start densifying as much as that thing is. Is that making sense? If let's pretend let's give it a rating. Out of 100 possibilities, or let's use 10. Out of 10 ratio of possibilities vibrationally, I'm like at a 9. I project into a creature, I'm a 2. And a 2 can't do the things a 9 can. So we projected ourselves into things and didn't know how to get out. And this was even further what we call the fall. This is where the mythologies of creatures, which were half centaur and half man, and that's what the mythologies of the Atlantean period were telling us about. Souls had gone into creatures, created half this, half that. It became really weird sci-fi. But it all did happen. Those pictures of beings being half of this and half of that, they are, if not literal, they are metaphorically depicting that we got lost and became mixed in with things. Now, not all of us. Some of us did. Some of us projected into anthropoids and other kinds of creatures. Some of us just gradually denser, and we became denser and started materializing into body-like forms. Astral bodies, etheric bodies, and then eventually body. But we decided to formulate human bodies. Slightly different than they are now, but roughly the same. Now, when we did that, we became groups, like tribes, primitive type tribes. So you have some beings that densified into, let's call it tribal beings. Some of us projected into things, anthropoids and other kinds of things. Some of us did not choose to densify all the way at all. We remained kind of like etheric light bodies. Those who remained like that remained like the guides. In other words, what you see today as a spiritual teacher with groups, in those days it would have been the etheric kind of person speaking to the tribes. Does that make sense? Okay. And they would be telling them what? They would be telling them, listen, we forgot, we separated, we forgot, and we need to remember who we are, which is exactly what we're doing today. So I love the fact that whether you call it Lemurian or whether you call it today, all of it's the same. We went on a bizarre journey without distance to a place we never left. And all we're needing to do is remember. So the etheric priestess, goddess, because it was primarily a feminine leadership in those days, was trying to encourage children, let's try to remember, let's go home. But you're now talking to beings that were projected into dense bodies and they couldn't even understand what you were saying. So the teachers really had to try to dumb it down, for lack of a better word. Just, dumb it down and speak to them at such a primitive level. And that's where we got stuck, and it's going to take millions of years of evolution to wake up. Why? Because we allowed ourselves to get that far gone. Now, time's an illusion. The bodies are an illusion, but the belief system's densified. When your beliefs become dense, like money doesn't grow on trees, guess what happens? Money doesn't grow on trees. But when you start to wake up, you go, wait a minute, money doesn't grow on trees. I don't like that saying anymore. So the first thing you're going to do is see that you don't like that. The second thing you're going to do is figure out how to chop up a tree and sell firewood. Now money does metaphorically grow on trees. And that's ingenious, but that's not all the way home. There's still another level where you actually can manifest money on trees. But that could be your reality. The world will not support that. Eventually, the Treasury Department's going to come knocking on your door. Excuse me. There's these $100 bills circulating. And, it's kind of odd because the serial number, it's like, instead of a long serial number, you just have one. And you're like, isn't that wonderful? We're all one and we can create whatever. No, they're just going to haul you away. So this world doesn't support this. So we divided into three primary groups, the Lemurian experience. And in a way, one of the positives about what we were able to do as Lemurians is we were experimenting with how to use our minds to manifest. But we were manifesting separation, fear created density rather than awakening. And that's why even today, we're still needing to go back and correct that original thought. I'm going to use my mind and I'm going to start believing that we can create, we can manifest anything. A being could actually have a child by believing itself to be impregnated with a new creation. And then she, if it was a female vibe, she could then give birth. So immaculate conception was still able to happen back then. Mary was just able to hold the same mindset as a Lemurian that I can create with my mind. And she did immaculately conceive. Humans don't like to hear these things because they can't remember how to do it. So they diss the whole thing. We need to go back to magical thinking. We need to go back to miraculous thinking and realizing, God, it's the wonderment. It's a childlike mind that we can do anything. And, then they're going to tell you, we think you have Asperger's, we think you have autism, because you're one of those believers in miracles. And that's why those kinds of groups, what they think to be malfunctions, mental malfunctions, are actually having a deeper understanding of the real thing. But they look messed up because they're trying to speak to people that are messed up. You see what I'm saying? But they're the ones with the problem. And that what seems like hypersensitive are simply more etheric. but they can't get all of it articulated to three-dimensional minds. Even as I stand here speaking about Lemuria. What were Lemurians like, Michael? I don't know, which group? You want me to tell you about the etheric kind of Lemurians, or the tribal ones, or the ones that were projected into objects? One from another, they're different. The Romans are the ones that coined that phrase. They called these people Lemurians, because even the Romans knew about this continent that was in the Pacific. The high mountain areas of the Lemurian continent are now what we call the Polynesian Islands. It slowly submerged and became the highlands became the Polynesian Islands. This is all true. You know, these things can be easily proven just by weaving all of it together. It all makes sense. But the Romans called Lemuria and the inhabitants Lemurians because it meant ghost people. So the Romans even knew from mythologies and stories passed down only 2,000 years ago, knew about these people, the Lemurians, and called them ghost people. Why? Because they were astral and or etheric beings. See, even they understood it to this time of their civilization. So Lemurians, what are they like? And they last from, hundreds of thousands of years. So they're different from the day we arrived compared to the day it submerged, because over time they got denser and denser. Still, there were the etheric teachers, masters, trying to get people home. And one of the great things, the gifts, was the belief that thought can create instantaneously. So the downside of thought manifesting was that they projected themselves into matter and got stuck. The positive was, from here, from the mind, they knew how to project. So what they would do is project lessons, teachings into things like crystals, so that people could hold the crystals and download information. See, that came from the Lemurian skill of thought projection. So you have Lemurian crystals or objects that you think is just an object, but it's like an Indiana Jones movie. Somebody can hold this thing and, it starts downloading. The Great Pyramid is made out of quartz, because the entire thing, because quartz holds memory, but you have to know how to unlock it. So when I sit and tune in, it's like, God, I just see and experience and can understand this whole Lemurian concept. Here's another thing. The Lemurians didn't have memory, because memory is based on your opinions of what happened in the past. But they were so childlike, everything was in the moment. It either is or it isn't. You don't go, yeah, but don't you remember? No. Is it here now? No. Well, then that's it. So they were just from this, wow, like what a cool place to kind of, be centered in. So not having had memory, they could project thoughts into objects so that things could be, in a pseudo kind of way, memorized in cells of, or in structure of a crystal, for example. So that someone could have an odd way of going back to have memories of life, let's say, in Lemuria or mankind's existence. Because we don't have memory, so we only have now. We're going to project what we have now and know now into these objects. Is that making sense? And that's why some of you are like into the stones, the rocks and minerals, and feeling that kind of the magic of minerals or stones, crystals and so on. So Lemurians didn't consider things based on the past or even contemplating the future. They just kind of came from a place of what's happening now. Now, and in that innocence, the innocence became a target. The same way human beings today, when you're very simple, very naive, very childlike, all too often on this planet, you become a target for predators, right? That originated right there. Lemuria is where we have the cellular memory, genetic memory of something going wrong like that. And that gets very tripped out, so I'm not going to go too far into that. I'm just saying that the gradual demise of the Lemurian civilization was partly because of the predators coming in and having such an ill effect on these beautiful, innocent-like beings. And then that's where we segue into the aggressive masculine kind of Atlantean civilization. But that's, another thing. Now here's something else that's interesting. The language of Lemurians, the closest you would know today would be like Native Americans, where something is like dit, dot, dot, like a few short words. The language, though, was never about, like if in A Course in Miracles, you're told, do an exercise. I don't know what this cup is for. I don't know what this pen is for. Because you only know things based on your memory of what you were told about it. There's no in-the-moment experience. So the Course in its workbook lessons is trying to get you to unplug your memories of what you think is true and experience them differently as the moment, okay? So the language of Lemurians was not, hi, honey, come here, your child, this is a podium. Podium, got it. Where everything is so linear and memorized. They don't have memory. So they had to always experience, and their language would be something that reflects the present moment. So essentially, it's kind of like sending out on a radar. You send out a signal and it hits something, so it's beep, beep, right? You send out a signal and it bounces off of the object you're sending the signal to. Sort of like that. When you experienced a tree, it wasn't, oh, look, that's a tree, just like I was told. That's a tall tree. Where do you get that it's tall? How do you know it's tall? Well, because I can see it. How do you know? Because I've seen tall trees before, and I was told the word tall. That's not how they were. They would be with something, experience it, totally fresh. Then there's a signal that comes from the mind, sort of like, who are you, what are you? That signal goes out. The thing answers, thank you. Thank you for asking. See, a woman too. Thank you for asking instead of, hi, tall, blonde, whatever. You're this race. You're no opinions. There's no past. There's no memory. So it's constantly, I don't know. You tell me. So you send out that frequency. The thing responds with its vibration. When the vibration comes back to the person, syllables pop out of their mouth or little short words come out. Hep, sup, or whatever. And you just named it, but you didn't give it your opinion of its identity. You asked the thing what it was, and it revealed itself to you. Doesn't that sound amazing? Yeah. I appreciate you, saying that, because otherwise I'd sit here going, oh, Michael, stop talking. If I'm the only one that thinks this is amazing, I probably should change the subject. Let's talk about positive thinking. So it's to me, it's beautiful. You allow it to convey its name. I've done workshops. I even took a group once, Sacred Sites tours, many, many, many years ago, even before I moved here, obviously. And I took a group up to one of the Red Rocks, and we sat, and I was explaining this to them. Ask that plant what its name is. And you can't just, fake it. You don't want to just get into faking things like that. Tune in and ask it. And it was amazing because several people in the group would come up with the same name. And that is the, very slim chance. And they would come up with the same name. But even more important than it proving itself factually is when you look at water, a stream, and you're asking it. I mean, you join with it. You experience it. Even every topic, intimacy, where somebody does someone. That's bizarre. That would be foreign to a Lemurian mind. Now we have things like, sacred spaces, sacred intimacy, sacred foods. To Lemurians, they would wonder what you're talking about because everything had to be sacred. That's all they knew. How could I cook a meal and it not be sacred? Stupid, you don't have any respect for me. I don't know why I'm even making you any food. Rat poison, rat poison. Humans. How could I not sit and think, oh, and I'm feeling like this is good today, and I'm feeling like the children a little extra nutrients, and everything is so conscious and conscientious. How wonderful if the blend of this would taste wonderful for people. See, everything's sacred. Intimacy, it can't be anything but. Who are you? Let's reveal ourselves. What humans do is undress to reveal themselves. Lemurians are like, what are you doing? I'm taking my clothes. Why? To reveal myself. Really? You have to actually move stuff? You can't just like, you know, in consciousness, here I am. You know, no, I have to, garments, you know, and wow. And when you get really excited, they go off faster. Wow, that's really hot. No, it's shallow. I understand that people dig it, and good for you. But there's another way. The Lemurians, everything was sacred. From cooking, parenting, gardening, everything was done from a sacred space. And if you think about it, part of you is going, wow, that sounds amazing. Think a little further and realize it also sounds exhausting. If you really are honest with yourself, that to try to remember to be that conscious constantly. Okay, I'm going to drive to work, but for a moment, let me just, you know. Sometimes you're like, I'm already late, I can't. And then you're like, I'm going to do a sacred ceremony this morning and totally commune with God for a moment. And the kids, and it's like, and you just get used to this world. So now doing things right seems tiring. But the truth is, not doing them right is what tires us. But you can't convince people of that anymore because they're so programmed with opposite thinking. You know, I'd like to go off the drug addiction, but man, there's all kinds of negative effects and withdrawals. And somebody told you that and you believed it so that you'd have a reason to not get off the drugs. The truth is, it's harder to stay on them. It's more effort to stay addicted to things that aren't real than it is to surrender to the only thing that is real. God, love, the light of God, you know? So instead of seeing things in their true interaction of vibration, humans have segmented all because separation becomes separation, becomes separation, almost like reversing fractals. You know, it just keeps breaking down to further separation till people, you know, walk down the street. Hey, you know, where's the namaste? Where's the aloha? Where's the sacred greeting? And now it's like, hey, you know, like these grunting, like, you know, weird, you know, and intimacy becomes something like two rocks being pounded together, and you know, like everything's so dense and so weird. Hey, what's up? What's up? What's up? Hey man. But where's the, you know, connecting? Well, here's where connecting is. You know, you're at the bank and you go to do the, you know, and the teller's like, okay, and there's a line of people behind you, especially at Chase, but never mind. Okay? There's a line of people behind you and they're all like, you know, tapping their foot and whatever, and your turn, and you're like, okay, before I give you my deposit, can we take a moment so I can just know who you are, and that way energetically I can give you thanks for taking my deposit. You know, I'm sorry, we're going to get a manager. I mean, that's where it goes. In this world, that's what happens. Get pulled over by a cop and go, before you write me up, sir, where were you going? Where were you? Let me see your registration. Well, that's all an illusion. Just give me a minute to... It doesn't go well, usually. I try those things and I get them to laugh, and that's always fun. But, you know, this world just doesn't support it. If your baby's crying and needs changed or fed right now, you really, it doesn't seem practical to go, I know you're not comfortable, but let's be for a minute. No, you know what? Take care of the ache. Take care of what seems to be happening. The problem with the human race is it's okay to take care of the immediate call that you think is real and important and then come back to spirit. The problem is they don't come back to spirit. They do that immediate thing, then they do another immediate thing, and then another. There's no, I'll do the immediate because that's what I need to do, respecting the illusion, but let me also come back to gratitude. Now that the baby's not crying because it needs fed, let me hold it and just appreciate it and ask what it really is. Just like ancient cultures, they would ask the child to reveal its name. And today they're like, what do you mean, ask the child its name? It can't even speak. It's not even born yet. How can you ask the child? They think you're ridiculous. I mean, I heard all that stuff when I had kids. I mean, you know, it's like, oh, what are you going to name it? Running water? You know, like, you know, they would just make fun of these things. And, you know, knowing that they're asleep, I could just be related to these people for another couple of years. Then I was like, bye. I gave it another couple of years where I was like, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. Very clearly, evidently, they know not what they do. They know not what they say. They know nothing. So it was easy to get used to the cynical comments. But why did ancient civilizations ask? Because that's what they did with everything. It wasn't just the children. It was everything. I don't know what anything's for. Why do you think A Course in Miracles tells you that in a workbook lesson? I don't know what anything's for. Because it's trying to get us back to that Lemurian Eden-like consciousness. I don't know. So ask, what are you? I want to experience you when we make love. And I want to experience these foods. What's it doing? Well, this food gives me all that my body thinks it needs. You see, you can even command, because that's that original using the mind to create. And, you know, I remember Yogananda sharing particular stories of magnificent stories about how, well, we needed something for our property once, and I said, let's go looking for, and we went looking for, I knew exactly what I wanted. I told my assistants, here's exactly what we're going to find. They're like, where are you going to find something that specific? That's too arbitrary. Like, we want to get a gate, and the gate needs to be 10 feet wide, but most gates are only 6, and we wanted 10. And on the gate, we want it to have wrought iron of a certain color, and we want to have spots on it that we can glue gemstones or whatever. And they're like, you're, okay. You know, and they went to some place, you know, and they checked it out, and they're like, junkyard or whatever, and looked around, no. And then he just says, do you happen to have a gate that's, oh yeah, I have just that thing right back here, you know, hidden behind the building. And, you know, people around Yogananda, they're like, this guy's a trip. No, he's just in his original consciousness. We can create anything. And the Lemurians did that for good and for ill. I say the Lemurians, but really, we were doing that as we came in to Lemuria. We just manifested it more in that time. Our consciousness, we do create. Not we once could, we still do. It's just that we're not creating well. We're not creating from connectedness and love. We're creating from fear and anxiety, from separation. I need to create this because someone else is going to create it if I don't. You know, there's, you know, musicians. I mean, I've shared this story before, but, you know, Michael Jackson was kind of neurotic in a million different ways. But one of his eccentricities was he would say, you know, he would get really anxious about getting a song just right and the musicians getting it just right. And they were like, why are you so uptight? And he goes, well, if we don't do this right, God's going to give the song to Prince instead. Well, you know, like, wow, really? Why don't you just enjoy the song that's coming through instead of competing it with, well, if I don't get it right, God's going to give the song to Prince. Really? You know, like, it's like, wow. But this is the kind of stuff that goes on. You know, this is the competitive or the fear-based, and then you have more of that going on in your life. Back to our original self, back to our original consciousness. I am as God created me, or I'm not as God created me. We start every day just like that. We talked about this the last few weeks, identity. I am or I'm not. And we're constantly asked by the universe, who are you today? I don't know, but I'm not connected. And so it is. And the universe will absolutely have to manifest an image of that for you because that's what she's there for. Always to show us our consciousness. Hoping that you will reach your pain tolerance sooner than later. And say, you know what? Enough is enough. Maybe I am as God created. Maybe I am divine. Now things improve because you're saying maybe, but you're not absolute. And then the maybe needs to eventually turn into certainty. And certainty has to eventually become the absolute. There's not even a certainty versus an uncertainty. There's just the truth of God. And that's where we're at. That's where we're going. The things that are happening in the world are tests. We're doing a workshop, but even if it's not the workshop, my book called You're Not Going Crazy, You're Just Waking Up. You know, this is about explaining how we got into this mess and how it needs to be turned around. The waking up seems challenging for people. The truth is, part of you, the original spirit spark, never went to sleep. So when you think you're evolving and waking up, you're really just peeling layers off to who you really are. So I look at this world and I think, man, sometimes we have lost something. I remember the band Yes has an album called Tales from Topographic Oceans. And the first song on it, which is half an album length, it's called The Revealing Science of God. You know, yes, they did everything so deep, right? The Revealing Science of God. But just in a nutshell, there's so many lines in that song that blow the mind, because he's talking about, I can't believe that we lost what we originally had. He says those words and they're like, I just can't believe we forgot. And it's exactly right, because he's describing, which by the way, that album was inspired by autobiography of a yogi, Yogananda, life story. So he writes this whole album based on, you know, the major parts of the teachings of Yogananda and the Vedas and so on. But this first album, the first side, is all about once upon a time there was this connection. I'm paraphrasing, but not by much. And this explosion took place and we all flew into the universe. And we're going to learn and experience and so on and so on. And then he gets to parts of the song and he's going, what happened? How did we forget what we really came here for? How did we forget our origins? You know, and he in his lyrical style, he's talking about, you know, the fall and vibration changes. He's very deep the way he does these things. But inevitably, at the end of the song, he does this chant that's about, you know, everything's going to come back to love for you and you and you. And that's the closing of the song. Everything's going to come back to this place. But why take so long? You know, why so much hurt in the meantime? And it doesn't have to take so much pain and suffering to get back to that place. To think sacred, to think oneness. You know, there's a great line, you know, off by a word or two only, from A Course in Miracles that I love, which is kind of like saying, I choose today to only think thoughts that God would have me think. And that's been on my mind for several days now. I can have a thought about someone, positive or negative, doesn't matter. I just say, but I choose to only think of this person as God would have me think of them. Here's an event, and I would only choose to see that as God would have me see it. See, the Lemurians were actually doing that. They weren't just praying for it, they were doing it, because that's all they knew, because they just came in. So they hadn't had so many layers of pain and hurt and resentment and forgetting and so on layered over them. So when we affirm, let me see this through God's eyes, you're actually choosing to remember. Lemuria is kind of like talking about Eden, where it's a civilization, it's a world of beauty and oneness. And people lived in such perfect harmony. And when, like I said, when they verbalize things, you're actually verbalizing the vibration of the thing in front of you or before you in this particular moment. And it's almost like a poetic-like way of experiencing life. It's, what are you telling me? Or like somebody writing song lyrics. You know, like what needs to go in that line right there? Or architecture. You know, there are architects who didn't say, I'm going to build a house right there. What they would say is, what do you want me to build there? They would ask the land. You've heard of these kinds of architects, right? And they say, it's already there etherically. Energetically, every space already has everything else. So you're just asking, what is the right thing to bring through to that line in a song? What's the right thing for that hillside for a house? When you do that, when you build from a sacred architecture, things last longer. And that's why your house will not look the way some of the ruins of Rome look. And ruins of Rome were destroyed by people. They would still be standing. Your house wouldn't. Your house isn't going to last 1,000 years. I mean, it'll be firewood long before then. Because everything was done so differently. When they're doing things like moving rocks, Lemurian monuments that are still out there remaining, and Atlantean, when they're moving rocks, you know, they didn't have slaves like you see on History Channel. You know, and they'll title these shows the real way they built the Great Pyramids, and it still shows a bunch of people, you know, chain gang or whatever. You know, they would just ask the rock to do a certain thing. We're going to go over here now, come on, and the rock would move. I know that sounds out there. According to ancient mythologies, they would write something on a papyrus, lay it on the rock, and the rock would then follow the instructions laid on the rock. You don't have to believe in these things. Have lots of beliefs and non-beliefs, but there will come a time where you'll see the weaving together of all the truths. And it's going to all make sense when people learn to do that. Instead of it being like segmenting. Well, I want to believe that, but I won't believe that. I want to believe, don't want to believe. I believe Jesus was wonderful. I don't know that he could walk on water. I don't think that's possible. You're deciding, and that means your opinions, which then means your ego is determining your belief systems. Why not jump into, I want to believe as God believes. And if I'm going to do that, I could see anything's possible. And yes, Immaculate Conception makes sense to me. You're not hearing things that sound far out. What about all the, the centaurs and all it sounds wild? Yep, I can totally see it. From the Lemurian projecting thing that went on to the Atlantean genetic manipulation that went on. And now the human race is all proud of itself because it's doing like the Atlanteans did. Hey, we're at the point where we can make, people half human and half turnip. Wow. You think that's impressive. And yet it's not. Screwing around like the Atlanteans did with genetics and trying to make yourselves into pseudo-gods is not our goal. It's to get out of playing God. Surrendering to the one and only, which is love. I said that about a turnip, and it's kind of funny. This is just a quick aside, and then we're going to wrap up. I remember when I was a kid, my mind was still very metaphysical. And I was just little, and I heard somebody say, this is adults talking, they're saying that John F. Kennedy isn't really dead. He's on life support. He's a vegetable. And I went right into, you can go from a human reincarnating into a vegetable? This little kid, and I'm already thinking reincarnation. He incarnated as a vegetable. Poor thing, Poor thing, kid mind, kid mind. But that's about like my daughter, when she was little, thought serial killers was people that broke in your house at night and ripped up your boxes of cereal. This is a childlike mind. It's beautiful in a sense. So I know, isn't that funny? Maybe it's because she was my kid. Anyway, so it's sort of coming to a close now. You could say that the Lemurians made it a point, in general, to say we need to remember. And the Lemurians had very hyper-developed pineal and pituitary glands, by the way. Very hyper-developed. So now when science says mankind's pineal gland is just a throwback, they don't know what it is or what it's for, but they just kind of go, well, whatever it was, mankind must have used it once upon a time, and it's now atrophying and it'll eventually be gone. That's not. It's mankind stopped using this consciousness, therefore the gland is atrophying. But in the Lemurians, it was very hyperdeveloped. What does the pineal gland do? It has a tail like a pollywog, and it flutters when light hits it. But there's no light in your skull. Or is there? So why would you have a gland that responds to light? Because the inner light would awaken it, and it would give you awareness. It would give you vision. So some animals now, you see a flock, let's say of birds, and they're going like this, and then they all go all at the same time. How do they do that? Like, it's so bizarre. It's like, are they trained? Did one of them have a whistle that humans can't hear? Ready, everybody? Humans are watching. Everybody get ready. To the right. To the left. They're all one. That's what's happening. So when they say right, they go right. When it's a we, and that's what happens. Humans think it was impressive to separate from each other, segment. They call it individuation. or individualization. And we think that's impressive. It's really not all it's cracked up to be. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Jesus said, when Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, he should have said, I think, therefore I'm not. As soon as he started thinking that you can think independently and be a little I, a little tyrannical I, you lost sight of who you are. I think, therefore I'm not should be, I choose not to think, therefore I am. And I know that sounds weird to some people. I want my thinking, which is why you're here. We're going to be able to move from I think, therefore I am to I accept. I have faith in us. And we're in this together. We need to move a little right. We need to move a little left. I understand it. If this group is taken over by ego, I can download more light to the group to feed off of to help bring them home, which is what a teacher, a parent, or whatever is a healer should be doing. Seeing themselves as simply a little more choosing awakening. Therefore, they can help the group, but they're still part of the group. As soon as the teacher, the mother, whatever, pulls away from and we're better than, you're split off again. Therefore, you're not. So, in a sense, the Lemurians, you could imagine, their civilization was all about going home. And that's why we had, years later, you had schools and so forth and temples, but this is how they lived. What we now know, your Harry Potter magic school, it would be like that. The children would be getting trained on having more magical abilities, but not quite in the, three-dimensional version of like a movie like that. But it's like that, magical abilities. And they, say incantations and be able to do things. But it wasn't for the purpose of fighting each other. It was how you lived. You knew how to say lights on, lights off, long before the clap on. And the lights, it's of course, it's consciousness. Why would we decide to stay limited in any form other than going all the way you could say is beyond me or beyond some of us. But if you think about it, there's really only one answer. It's fear. And that's what it means to say people are afraid of their true power. Human beings are afraid of their true magical abilities. Are you thinking it's only the magic? No. The reason people are afraid of remembering their true magical abilities is because they're first going to have to take responsibility for acting very unmagical. And that is too much for them. Even though we know the gift down the end is great. God, I could really get to the place where I can manifest anything, really? Yeah, but first you have to, never mind. I'll just go back to sleep again. Because I do not want to own my miscreations. But if you know they're miscreations, then you'll know they're called illusions. And if they're illusions, you don't have to be afraid of them. Oh, but I'm terrified of them. Okay, never mind, go to sleep. Because that is technically the safest place to be. Asleep. Even A Course in Miracles will tell you. The Holy Spirit will not come in and bring you to higher consciousness if it terrifies you. So it's going to be a day at a time. And those who say, give me a quantum leap, become the masters on this planet. And we go, wow, how amazing. This guy Michael he's teaching, or this teacher over there, this master from the past. We think it's amazing, but that's nothing compared to where we're all going. But we think it's so much safer to take one guy, set them up on a podium, or they've written a book or whatever, and go, wow, aren't they amazing? That's one reason we do it. Segment them out and place them there. But where did they come from? You. That's your magic manifesting at the podium. That's your light in that healer. But you want to act like it's them, because that keeps you nice and safe, not owning it your own magic. And I'm not saying don't go to the teachers, don't go to the healers. Go to them and own that they're part of you. They would be able to work on you far more if you accepted you're one with them. Instead of just projecting, wow, you're the healer and I don't know, I'm just all broken and I need your help because you're special. It's okay to see them as special in a sense, but you're also special as well. So why don't you join your specialness with theirs, and they'll be able to know exactly what to do for your spine or your muscles or your joints or whatever else it happens to be. Why? Because they'll know who you are. Why? Because like in Lemuria, they'll be able to send out a frequency to say what's going on, and it'll come back, boop. And when that signal hits them, the target is 3 miles away to the southwest, etc., meaning they'll tune in and go, you know what this is? This is, chiropractic. It used to be crunch, crunch, whatever. Now it's going to be like, the guy's going to be doing smudge and rattles, and it'll be etheric body, and go, you know what's happening? This is a spear wound from 5 lifetimes ago. Healing's going to become healing instead of a linear topic. You won't be a chiropractor or a surgeon. I'm a healer. And you just stay open, and anything comes to you that needs done. That's what healers are going to look like more and more, because that's what they looked like once upon a time. There was no segmenting, no limitation. It's, how can I help you today? I put myself before you. You tune in, and you can tell exactly what's going on for me. Just like parenting should be. Please take a few centering breaths. Breathing all this. That's a transmission. It's a channeling. There's a frequency. It took the form of words in a talk, but that's not what's really happening. You can hear today as a talk you don't like, very dense. You can hear it as a talk you do like, less dense. Now you're raising vibration. You can hear it as a talk that was extraordinary and magical, beyond even words. And now you're going higher. Then, beyond the words, there's an experience. Something happened today. It took me into the cosmos, but don't analyze the cosmos. Civilizations, vibrational conversations. All of a sudden, I just feel like I'm opening. So let the talk now go from speaking to experiential. This will expand as far as you allow it to. Remain the witness so that you're present, but also go. The wonderment. At the very least, let your mind enjoy the wonderment. The realization that, wow, this has always been true. The magical abilities of our consciousness, it's always been true. And throughout history, there have been children of God trying to get us home. So tune into it. Try this, accepting that you're not a mere human being. Try tuning into, do I feel like I've ever heard the term, felt the term, was the term, bearer of light, a light bearer, children of light, children of the One. The Lemurians were often called children of the sun, children of the law of God. Today, a term that I came up with back in the 80s, it's commonly used now, light workers. Tune into it, guys. You know the term. There's a feeling to it. You've done this work at some capacity. I remember being like a child of the sun. I remember the tropical, beautiful place we once lived. I remember the enormous trees like the redwoods. I remember vibrations from flowers and essences. I remember living in frequency and consciousness, not density. Tune into it. Try to remember it so it can start like time release capsules. So it starts kind of popping open cellular memory of a more magical time. The Divine Mother is blessing this like all of our services. And she, when you're allowing this, she's weaving into your mind, and she'll work independently with you in what you need to start opening neurons to remember. This is not only possible, this is inevitable. So let's just speed it up and get there, allowing this to open and open and open. People that are asleep are afraid. They're often violent, hurtful, selfish. Of course, it's what people do when they're afraid. They act out. And there are some of those. That's the sleeping people act out angrily, but sleeping people are also often victims because they don't step up and say no. So whether you're aggressive or hyper passive, it's still extremes of those who are asleep. Where do you really want to be? The center. So what we're seeing is people once upon a time lived in their center. That's where I'm coming from now. That's what I'm choosing to be now. More and more from my center. I can step up or step back, but not excessively. I'm a light worker. I'm awake. I can prosper without taking from others. I just prosper. I can teach without preaching. I can love without attachment. Center, center, center. Remind me, Holy Spirit, and allow this to expand in my being and to continue blossoming. Then I become more and more like I was as a guide in Lemuria. Lastly, just feel like you're soaking that in, sort of owning that, really anchoring this as not just a meditation or a visualization, a reality. I really, truly get this. I really feel like I'm integrating this into my being. And I give thanks that today, not only am I feeling this, but I also understand it. In many ways that I don't even know. I get this. There's one truth teaching under all the mythologies and everything else, and we're getting back to that, and that's my choice today. And so it is. Nice job. Isn't that nice? What's these humans? Oh my God. That's a phrase that pops out of my mouth. I don't mean it in any like hyper rude way, but it just some show or whether it's history or whatever. I just think, God, these humans, man, they're just like so strange. How can they not see this, How do they not know this? How do they not see the connection to things? Let's talk about Brahma and Saraswati. But wait, isn't there a connection? Think about this. How often have you ever heard this? Brahma, Saraswati. What about Abraham and Sarah? Did anybody ever stop to think that maybe, even though one seems to be Far East Indian, no, Brahma and Saraswati. Abraham and Sarah were being embodiments of them. Dense human versions, but they were living that archetype. Their names are the same, for God's sakes. And yet, people, oh no, there's no connection. It's just funny to me, but it's understandable. Separated minds see everything as separated. Well, let's not be separated minds. Let's get back to one-mindedness and we see the connection. And to me, it's wonderful to see those connections. It's so exciting. There are days when I think, when everybody gets that, what a day of celebration. These two tribes beating up on each other. Well, we're better than you. Wait, sorry, we're you. You were attacking them, but that was you're attacking yourself. You were harming other people. You're a narcissist, and you're acting out, but that's you, experiencing you. It's an amazing thing when you see everything as projection that comes back around eventually. So thank you so much for sharing this time with us. The connectedness. Breathe it in, the connectedness. Native American and other continents, cultures. Guys, now when you see a show and you see them use those short terms, ... you realize, oh my God, that was vibrational representations. The beautiful language. Listen to Cherokee and Apache, but Hopi. Listen and then go indigenous people of every culture. And it's like, wow, they're talking vibrational representations, not memorized words and meanings that came from someone else. It's what are you? And I'm experiencing you, and then words, giving deep thanks that the light of God surrounds us.
We are the light of God.
The love of God enfolds us.
We are the love of God.
The power of God protects us.
We are the power of God.
And the presence of God watches over us.
We are the presence of God.
Wherever we go, God is, I am, We are. Take a deep breath, and so it is. Take a deep breath and a sound. Keep going. Take a breath when you need and keep going. Keep going. Let the sound represent what you heard today, what you learned today. Tune into all of the all and let the all make a sound through you. Become the sound. We're not formulating words yet, but at least a sound. Now own that sound, let it vibrate in you, as you, through you, and now lastly, send it out to all others, to your brothers and sisters throughout creation.